Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 215 of Retro Power Uncut. And we are here in the fabrication shop as per our normal schedule. And we're going to start with the Aston Martin DBS. There's lots of other exciting things going on this, but we're going to start with the obvious elephant in the room here, so to speak, of the aluminium body, which Matt has been working on and is about to stop working on now, because we're about at the stage where it's time for a natural pause on this. The basic objective was to establish which aluminium panels were usable and which were not usable. We still have a question mark in terms of the bonnet and boot lid. We're going to come to them later because they still need paint stripping. But in terms of the front and rear body, we pretty much know where we're at. This quarter panel is salvageable, needs a little repair here, a little bit of a dent taken out and a few other little bits of titivating, and the basic shape is good. Matt, as you'll notice, has been putting some, marking some stations onto this side to do some cardboard profiles, so that he can take the profiles from this side and compare them to the other side, because there was a difference between the wheel arches one side. The far side has had a lot more accident damage, and the conclusion is thus. I will gesticulate. The conclusion is that we're going to replace this section to about here. ASR, Sean at ASR, is who is making the front panel for us that we talked about previously. I'm going to ask him to make us a lower repair section for this, simply because he again has the books to make these parts on. He has the correct Aston Martin books. In fact, he has the original Aston Martin books. So he's going to make these panels down to this height here. Below that, we can salvage this panel. The wheel arch is the wrong shape, but Matt's a chunk of the way through sorting that. It's obvious that this car's had a side swipe this side and then been knocked out, but not quite knocked out correctly. So there's a little bit of more repair work to do in that area. But it's coming together, and we're now confident that otherwise, other than that section, which is definitely really needs replacing, all of that rear section we will be able to reuse. There's a couple more sections to weld in. We're not going to weld them in now because we've still got to get this panel made and then weld that in, weld that in. It makes sense to do all the welding in one hit slightly later on, and that then means that Matt can hop off this job and go back on to working on the E-Type to pick up the inner rear end structure work that we've still to do on the E-Type. So that ties in quite nicely, because it's got us to where we wanted to be on the body, so that we haven't got any surprises further down the line, and we know we've got bodywork that we can use, and it means that then we can carry on with the E-Type. And then the other work on the Aston is going to be revolving. I think George is going to elaborate further on this, but we now have SEMA Tech. I'll tell you what, we're going to move slightly because we're very near a very noisy area, so I'm going to get Jamie to reverse. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to put that on here, and we'll talk over here because I'm a bit further away from the fans for the paint booth, because I think there's going to be a lot of background noise standing over there. I mentioned last time we have our SEMA Tech transfer permission sorted out now. That's all happened thanks to Matt at SEMA, Matt Emger. I'm not quite sure how I pronounce his surname. EMGE, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that. But Matthew, anyway, at SEMA Tech transfer, he has sorted out our permissions for that. That's all good. General Motors have said that's all good from our point of view, that we're allowed to use that CAD. We've explained why we want it. It's a very thorough system. I completely understand why. But they have now given us permission for the CAD data that we need, and it's just a wonderful thing. It's very nice to be able to pick up sub-assemblies and not have to draw them, not have to scan them, not have to do all that side of things. We can just pick up an OEM sub-assembly in CAD and it is correct. We don't have to reverse engineer it. So that's really nice. So we now have that CAD, and we have some other bits of CAD. We have the CAD for a 2018 Chevy Camaro SS rear differential and drive shafts, which we're hoping may be the right track width. We may actually be able to use stock drive shafts. That's one of the early stages we've got to do, is verify the exact axle widths that we need and verify whether those drive shafts will enable us to use, whether we can use stock drive shafts or not. Stock axle shafts, as they'd be referred to in America. We don't know yet whether we can use standard ones or not, so that's still to be discovered. But that's what's going to then be going on in the background, is the next stage is drawing the chassis for that car based on the Corvette hub and wishbone assemblies, and the the Camaro differential assembly. So that's the next phase on that. Moving on from that, we will touch on the Saab, and we're going to walk to the back of the Saab because Bobby's work has all been at the rear on this. So Bobby has been getting the inner quarter panel work finished off that you saw last week, the beginnings of the shaping of those last week. He's got that all finished, got them screwed in place at the moment, not welded in place yet. The welding's going to wait for the point where we don't need to keep taking the body on and off. So at the moment they're just screwed in place. There'll be a lot of screwing things in place because, as I say, at the moment we do need to be able to remove the body. He's got those screwed in place, done a beautiful job of fabricating those. They're all surprisingly heavy duty. Decided to go quite overkill on things. They're actually all in 2mm thick steel, just because for the small area of steel it doesn't add a lot of weight. And the turrets are surprisingly, this area is surprisingly flexible. The S4 parts there are quite flexible without the outer panel work on. So we've gone pretty sturdy in that area to make sure the forces are transferred into the shell in a nice fashion. Then moving on from that, Bobby started work on these rear corner areas. So he's fabricated the chassis rail extensions where we need to, the Audi S4 rail finishes here, and the Saab rear cross member here, and there was bits of Saab that were not really of any use there, so they've all been removed, and then Bobby's fabricated an inner and an outer section to extend the rails in the same way as the structure was on the S4. So he's made an outer section which then forms this pocket where my hand's coming out here, fabricated that as a closing section, then an inner channel section that goes down inside the chassis rail as far forward as about here, and then that's all plug welded in place, and then an outer section which is this visible piece here, which then goes sockets over that inner section, it's plug welded to it and forms the mounting for the rear cross member of the Saab body shell, which is just screwed in place at the moment. Those screws will be replaced with welds again. When the body shell doesn't need to be removed anymore, those screws will be replaced with welds. But there's further work to do that there. As you'll notice above my head, swinging perilously like a man trap, is an incredibly heavy tailgate. We've put that on temporarily just to check clearances here, because the section he's just starting work on now is the return. This metal here will be removed. This is original Saab. That's the tailgate seal. We're going to be removing the metal back to this original flange here and fabricating a new lower section below this flange, a new cross member piece, sort of a return, that is then going to mate up with a new boot floor. The spare wheel well section of the Audi S4 is being removed roughly where that Sharpie dotted line is. And Bobby's going to be fabricating a new boot floor that is raised up compared to the original, that then meets the Saab rear body cross member at the same height as the original Saab boot floor met, because the customer's not bothered about having a spare wheel in this car, and we are probably putting a semi-cosmetic, semi-functional diffuser section under the rear of the car. Probably made it, I would say made in carbon fibre. We haven't planned any of this yet, so this is all to be done. It's got to be drawn first, but diffusers in anything other than a pretty strong composite don't really work, they just flex. So really it's going to have to be made in carbon. Even when it's not a fully functional diffuser, they still take quite a lot of aerodynamic load, so they do still bend a lot, so they need to be pretty damn strong. So that's what's going to be going in place of what is the current spare wheel well. As I say, it's semi-functional, don't shoot me down on this. I'm quite aware that designing that independently of all of the other rest of the underside of the car is going to mean that its function is pretty limited. The primary function is cosmetic. If we pick up a bit of secondary aero function, great, but don't shoot me down for claiming it's a diffuser. It will do some diffusing, but the primary function is cosmetic. But that's what we'll be going in where the spare wheel well is now, making use of that space under there, because that will have no great function going forward. So that's where the fabrication is going to continue. This bit will be going, that'll be closed off. That'll be made structural from the end of the rail there across to the end of the rail there. And the reason for the tailgate is to ensure that we've got clearance under here, and also to profile the new panel to the same curvature as the lower part of the tailgate. say these sections are where the inner structure of the car will go. These are designed to tie in with the same plane as the rear light mounts, because all of this structure, all of this bit here will be going. That'll all be replaced with carbon fibre, which will be in a different area altogether. But this inner structure where the lights go will be staying, and so that will be picked up in the same plane as this panel is here, hence why that's sort of floating in mid-air there at the moment. That will serve a purpose, it just doesn't right now. So all very much work in progress, but you can kind of see where we're going with the rear end. The B-posts, as we saw last week, the bottoms of the B-posts are now pretty much in place. The next phase, having done this rear section, will be the fairly complicated area of the door shuts. And you're going to get to see some quite exciting fabrication in that area, and probably a little bit of hair loss. Bobby hasn't got much, I haven't got much, so we're not going to lose that much. But getting the sealing system to work on the doors with the door revisions is going to be quite exciting. We have a plan, but it's a fairly fluid plan. I'll just leave it at that. Moving on from that, we move on to the E-Type, and we were fortunate to have the customer for this car visit yesterday and go through various things, one of which was saying we'd like to see it moving on, and we were explaining all the variety of things occurring on this, and the fact that we're now very close to being able to get KS Composites to continue with the carbon fibre work. We've had to do quite a lot of CAD work. I'll let George talk about that. We have one bit of manual moulding work to do, which is we need to put a return into the mould for the carbon fibre bonnet. The mould is sat up on top of our prep bay mezzanine. We need to put a return into that, and that's going to be done the old-fashioned way by hand. We need to put the steel buck bonnet, pardon me, there into that mould to establish exactly where that return's got to go. So one of the jobs next week will be doing that. And then further to that, the next round of fabrication work is in the boot, where we're going to be fitting the battery carrier, well, manufacturing and fitting the battery carrier, boot floor reinforcement and the spare wheel carrier into that area, and also doing the fuel filler, which again I'll let the CAD guys show you. Carol and the CAD guys will go through that. But in terms of doing the metal work, the location is determined and the type is determined, so it's got to be drawn. Then we've got to make a press tool and make the sections we've got to let into the body there. So all exciting times there, and some good fabrication, and Matt's going to be moving on to that, doing some nice fabrication. I imagine Bobby will lend him a hand making the press tools. So that's all going to be exciting stuff. So that's where we're at on E-Type. Moving on from that, we come over to XJC. Stu has been working on our air filter arrangement. This is quite good actually. This is quite nice real-time stuff going on here, because last week we talked about air intake and I suggested that we weren't going to try and put anything up here because we don't have enough filter area, which we don't. And we talked about getting air in this side of the engine bay and how we were going to take the air in beside the radiator and modify this buttress that supports this side of the engine bay and carries the bonnet hinges, and roughly how we were going to do that. And ta-da! Stu has done it, or the bulk of it. So we have a drum made in 2mm thick 5000 series aluminium, which he has rolled up and then put some beads into and TIG welded up, and then he's wheeled up a little dished base for that, so we get a nice, A, it's a nice shape and not just flat, and B, it water drains to the centre, so we can put a duckbill, a rubber duckbill in the middle of the bottom of that as a water drain, so any water that gets ingested and shed by the filter drops in the bottom and drops out. He's then made an oval intake which fits into the cutout in the radiator surround. Stu has made the cutout in that buttress and welded that in place. That's just tacked in place at the minute. He's made this cutout in the buttress here, so we've got room for that to clear the radiator. We're waiting for the radiator before we absolutely finalise all this and fully weld everything in place. But we should have plenty of clearance there for that. Stu's had the headlights in place and trialled everything, made sure everything fits. We still have plenty of area to get the air in. We've got enough cross-sectional area in that to take the air into the filter housing. The filter housing accommodates a filter that I don't just have to hand, but it's a large K&N cone filter designed for Chevy LS3 engines. You know, it's rated for 500 horsepower, so there's no problem there. That sits inside that drum with about 30 millimeters clearance around it. And then the top for that drum, there's going to be a bolt flange TIG welded into the top of that drum that the filter will just drop through. And then we're going to 3D print the top housing for that, which will bolt on. That'll be 3D printed in heat-resistant carbon fibre reinforced nylon filament. And that will close off the top of that drum and also form the flange that or the spigot that the air filter mounts onto, and then it will also form the duct which will turn the air through 90 degrees and collect it from the filter, and then form the adapter to the flexible pipe that is then going to connect to the original XJR6 air intake there. So it's going to be quite a neat setup. We'll have that nice 3D printed section doing a transition across, and then that will probably come to about there, and then we'll have a flexi pipe between there and there to allow, with a little bellows to allow for the engine movement, and that will be a really neat setup. Decent filter capacity, K&N element, so just a high quality filter. Yeah, nice setup, effectively made, good work, Stu. And I think at that point I'm going to hand over to the bodywork, to the body shop, and I'm going to let Mark take you through that. But I'll briefly say I've also done a little bit in the body shop. Kind of thing I've been on with a bit this week is in there, which is making the beginnings of the moulds for the side skirts for the Allegros. Last week I think we said that we'd machined the centre sections for those and 3D printed the ends, and I can't remember whether we just glued the ends on last week, but certainly we were on the, if we hadn't already done, I think I was about to glue the 3D printed ends on. We've done that. We've had a little trial fit on the car. There's a couple of tweaks needed, and we had to actually add a little bit of length to the ends. So I've just done a bit of a build up with some fiberglass filler on the ends of those to lengthen them very slightly, about 3 millimeters, just to get the fit slightly better. And then they've been sanded, polyestered. The polyester's been sanded, primed, and I'm just finishing them to 500 grit at the moment. Then we'll be waxing them, and then we'll be doing the split lines and doing a split mould. There's a 3-piece, basically it needs 3 split lines on. There'll be it'll be a 4-piece mould, 3 split lines on those moulds. So that'll be exciting. Be getting on with that the rest of today, and then hopefully next week should be able to get into making the moulds for those and then making the final parts. At that point, I'm going to hand over to Mark, let him take you through all the other stuff in the body shop, because there's lots going on there.
All right, welcome back to another episode. The Jensen is steaming ahead. It's been primered. I think Jamie might have some footage of that, probably not, but he probably has. So yeah, now lads got it back on the spit, doing all the sealer work underneath, as you can see, all the black stuff. Just make sure no water gets into all the seams and stuff. Then we're soldering onto Raptor then. We're doing sealing inside now, because that's prepped. I think we'll be doing the black, matte black PU direct straight onto metal paint. That'll be going inside, and then we'll get it back on the trolley, block it 320, and then yeah, we're heading well towards paint. So hopefully in the new year, well, into the new year, not before the new year, should see some paint on it. Also, I've got the panels primed. You'll be seeing them now as I'm talking. Yeah, they've the bonnet, boot lid, 2 doors, they're primed. Also, I've been doing some direct, like the panels, matte black panels. All the panels will go everywhere, like here in the wheel arch, inside the car, some dash bits, servo cover, etc. Also done the rocker cover for one of the Allegro Civic engines, well, Honda engine. What else are we going to know, Jamie? What else do we have? Camaro dash part I had to do while we had it in. Also, I've been, all the cos is painted. I'm started wet flatting some of that stuff now. I think Jamie's got some footage of me start to wet flat. So yeah, it's a busy week. You see I'm all messed up. Also, everybody now, after this video, press the subscribe button, do a little like, have a little comment. No nasty ones though, I'll send the boys round, all right? We know Nat goes on a tangent, we know that, but that's it, so see you next time.
Thank you very much, Nat. And I'm going to do reverse order this week and start with the Camaro. So we have now done, we made a decision, which I mentioned the other week, to change the centre part of the dash, which was originally going to be silver, to being black, which then worked better with leaving the machine components, the billet bits in the centre console, as a bare aluminium finish with a clear anodising. So we've done that. That meant we could get that back in. We can get the console into its final position so that Richard can measure up to do the gear gaiter. And it's also quite a nice hint of how it's going to look in there. And although it's almost impossible to photograph or capture on video the interior in this, I don't know why. It's something to do with the Alcantara, the lighting in here. You can never do it justice, but it does look absolutely awesome. I can't wait to see it all together once Richard's finished the last few bits. He's got the other armrest to do, get the seats in, do the final bits of steaming and stuff on them. So that's going to be absolutely very cool to see that come together. The Churchill Jag behind that, battery wiring, George has just been on with that, basically running the main power wire through the routing we've planned. So we've got a little bulkhead connector through the rear bulkhead, so it comes from the battery box that's let into the boot floor, briefly outside, because so we didn't have to come out through the lid of the box and interrupt the boot floor area, then back in behind what will be the bulkhead panel behind the fuel tank, over the top of the sort of rear axle area next to the fuel tank, and then through a bulkhead connector back into the interior, and then along down the sill inside to the power stud on the front bulkhead. So just a minor thing on that one, but moving forward, and then we're just in the process of finalising some of the interior design stuff so we can start printing parts for the door cards on that. So that's where we're at with those, and then I'm going to move on to Allegro. So one of the things this week Anthony's been on with is the power steering plumbing. So we're running a electro-hydraulic pump on these. Because the space at the front is extremely at a premium, shall we say, there's not really room to do a belt-driven power steering pump. So when we did all the dry build work on these, we made the decision to retain the hydraulic Honda rack, but switch to it being an electric pump for it, which is what this pump down in this corner here is. Bobby did all the mounting for that when it was bare metal, and then Anthony's just been making up the line. So we wanted to do it in hard lines just to make it a little bit neater. So there's just a flexible link on the last bit of the return to the reservoir and then the feed out from it. And I will just briefly mention actually on this, Steve from Cortico helped me out sorting out the new pumps for this. I've got another one coming for that car as well, and you might notice the banner behind me there. Worthy of mention, amazingly, they are the world's biggest manufacturer of rubber seals. What they basically do is reseal kits for steering racks, transmissions, anything that's basically got oil in an automotive environment. So you can check out their website, find out more information about them, but they're basically a supplier to the aftermarket. So yes, thank you Steve for helping us out with those pumps. And that's pretty much where we're at on the visual stuff that's laid out in front of me. Alex has been working on the wiring harness, so he's carrying on with the build of the engine ECU inside harness is the best description of it. So the bit that goes from the engine ECU to the bulkhead connector and branches out to interface with the main chassis wiring harness. I think he's finished the HVAC wiring harnesses now. And then another thing he was on with this week, he just went down to Injector Clinic down the road, Cowlett Injector Clinic actually, who helped him out doing some tests on the injectors, because although they're brand new injectors, we wanted to be absolutely sure that the flow rate and the spray pattern on them was what we wanted, and also test the flow rate at different pressures, because we're running them quite close to the maximum they will flow, but we wanted these specific injectors for size reasons, for cost reasons. They certainly seem to tick every box as long as the flow that they provide is what the manufacturer claims, and actually it's spot on. So I think he tested them at 3 bar, 3.5, 4 bar, just to see what they do at each one, and was happy with that. So they are going to be a good choice for this, and actually it was worth doing that bit of testing because they also look like a suitable choice for the V12 on the E-Type next door. So yeah, that's where we're at with that. I think Nat's probably also already shown you some of the work he's been doing on the side skirt moulding for these. I think at that point I will not forget to mention Project Kuma, which is what, who's been working on that? Gibbo's been working on that this week. And we're essentially buttoning up a lot of the remaining interior stuff, so that's always a nice stage to be at. It's just been finishing the last little corner cappings on the cage. They're like leathered 3D prints that we made for the intersections of the cage, so we could do a really neat job of upholstering that. Center console assembly, so getting the billet parts, the phone tray, the USB socket, the isolator button, the hazard button, the gear shifter bezel, all of those components onto the center console in. I think the instrument binnacle was just being buttoned up, getting the warning lights in. I can't remember if we've fitted that yet, but it was on its way to being in. The screen wash tank / footrest. People who are long-term watchers will have seen this before, but basically it's a fabricated tank that also acts as the passenger's footrest. And we've done that. We did a similar thing on Gordon Murray's car. It allows us to have a very small tank in the engine bay that is a perfect mirror image of the brake fluid reservoir. But that's not really a suitable size for screen wash, so that's actually just the fill point, and then there's a pipe that goes through the bulkhead down to the footwell tank, which also acts as a footrest. So that's quite a neat touch on those. So yeah, and he's been getting the seats in, so I think the only thing left on that is the rear screening and the back section of the rear shelf, and that is interior done. And then I need to get my behind in gear and finish off the bonding of the outer skins to the inners on the bonnet and boot, and then they can go for paint. And I think that's more or less it on that. So yeah, good stuff all round. I've got
Allegro steering wheels.
Ah, yes. And yes, there's a couple of things. Jamie's very kindly just reminded me. I knew there was one I needed to talk about on these. Allegro. So, two things. One, George has been machining a really tight elbow for the AC connection. It's actually, well, it's not on here, but where the condenser is here, we needed a mega tight 90 off it. And it's originally like a flat bolted flange O-ring type connection. Now we can get adapters off the shelf that bolt to that and then take a threaded fitting, but by the time you've stacked those together, you're kind of that far out from the thing itself. So we've just machined up a little piece with the pipe straight off the side of it to give us a super tight 90-degree bolted flange joint for the condenser there. So that's something that George is on with, and then Jim has been on with these steering wheels. So we've had a lot of questions over time about whether we'll still use the Quartic wheel, and yes, that is exactly what we're doing. So Luke has designed that. Andy at Concept 303 machined the aluminium part, basically the frame of it, and then Jim this week was using our CNC router to machine the rim, which is basically two sections machined in ply. One goes on from the back, one goes on from the front. They will then be bonded in place, and then finally that will be over to Richard to leather that. And then there's a centre section, which is a 3D print, which is the horn push, and there are mountings machined into the frame that take some little switches that horn push will push against when you press it, and some shoulder bolts with springs around it, which give it the springing action. So yeah, cool to see those steering wheels starting to come together. It's just a slightly beefier, our interpretation, I suppose, of the original Quartic wheel, but it's actually quite a good design. Although people kind of mocked it at the time, you now see a lot of those shaped wheels in Mercedes and quite a few modern cars, and there is a good benefit in that you get a certain size of wheel, but you get more visibility of the instruments than you would with that diameter as a circle, and you also have more legroom than you might otherwise have. So it's not a stupid design. So yeah, that's where we're at with that, and then I'm going to hand over to Luke and George to tell you what they've been up to.
Hi guys, welcome back to the CAD Grotto. This week I've been on with a lot of Jaguar stuff again, funnily enough. So I think last week you saw a couple of different variations for the rear lights on Project Geneva, the E-Type. Those were all sent off to the client at the end of last week, and he's come back with a bit of feedback, and we've kind of narrowed that down to, I'll send Jamie over some renders. It's a variation of one of the designs that you saw last week. One of the changes we made is that same overall shape, it's now got a strip which continues across the entire back end of it, and we're still deciding whether we're going to bring that forward or not, but by the end of like the next 2 days we'll know that. So I've been on with doing a couple of renders based around that, just giving him different options. I'm just doing a couple of different car body colors now for him as well, because he's requested that, and then I think that should really finish up today. And then outside of that, it's just been a lot of like really small bits. Very often assembly shop will need little bits plasmid, brackets made, all of this sort of stuff, and that kind of falls to me. as George is normally busy doing a lot of different larger things. So I've been doing a lot of that this week, but that's always really fun. And then, say Jag Heavyweight, because I also bought a Jaguar, which is pretty cool. I was rear-ended a few weeks back, and I've replaced the world's best car, which was the Suzuki Swift, with the world's second best car, which is, I'm joking, of course, Jaguar S-Type, and I'm loving it. Thanks, guys. I think George is going to talk now, so I'll pass over to George.
Okay, hello, thank you, Luke. So today, this week, I've been working on a smattering of different things. So I started the week with finishing some of the intake stuff off of the E-Type. So we've done, I don't know if you've seen this before, I don't think you have. So we did a little bit of a 3D printed prototype to check different things like injector clearance on the back plates and all this kind of stuff. So this is a little kind of mock-up. So bit of the back plate. Obviously we don't need to print the whole thing at this point because I just want to check specific things with it. And then this would be, try not to smash my glass, a simulation of, that would be a carbon piece, obviously the full intake, but that would be made out of carbon, then this would be made out of billet, and then these would be bonded together, and then that gives us a way of making the carbon, or Kia specifically, making the carbon airbox with also having all this machine detail in the front, and then this will then bolt on to the intake simply like this. Yeah, we think it's going to be a nice, elegant solution once it's done, and it's kind of fixed a lot of the issues we were having with the previous way of going about with the whole intakes and throttle body solution. What else I've just started on actually is the Aston Martin suspension stuff. So I haven't really actually got into it yet, but SEMA Workshop, as Nat's probably talked about before, we've managed to actually get a load of data now. So this is one of the bits we've managed to get, which is all the C7 suspension geometry directly from GM. So this will then go into making our suspension for the Aston. Obviously we've got to design a chassis for all of this, that will go into the car, yada yada. But the plan at the moment is, which again I think Nat's already talked about, but I'll just give a really brief thing on, is we're going to be using as much existing components as possible. So the control arms, the uprights, steering racks, all this kind of stuff. We're going to try and use existing parts off, ideally GM stuff, because then it will all fit together. All the brakes, calipers, yada yada, because you can buy it all from GM at a really quite surprisingly cheap price, and the quality is not going to be kind of matched by anything aftermarket. So yeah, that's going to be what I'm going to be on to next. But what I've also been doing in the background for the last couple of weeks, and specifically a bit more this week, is we've thought we need to kind of upgrade our surfacing game when it comes to bodyworks. So until now we've been using Fusion, which if anyone's done surfacing in Fusion before, it is possible. It's just getting that surface quality and fidelity is really difficult / impossible because it doesn't have the tools like other softwares. In an ideal world, we'd be using something called Alias, which again, if anyone knows about Alias, is an amazing software and really capable, but does cost about 20 grand a year subscription. So we're not going to be doing that. But there's a new software on the block called Plasticity, which a couple of people have started picking up. And we're now giving a go. So I've now got the task of learning another new software, which is good. But it does mean that I have a book full of keybinds and other other things of trying to actually get the information into my head. So that's why it kind of looks like I haven't been making a huge amount of progress the last couple of weeks, is because I've been doing a smattering of different things, which we don't talk about everything. But yeah, also trying to learn a new software, which fingers crossed will be the software we end up using, because I don't want to be wasting all my time. But yeah, I think that's it from me this week. Passing back to Cal, I'm guessing.
Thank you very much, George. And now I'm going to hand straight back over again. So I'm not going to bother going down to the den this week, because in terms of mechanical stuff, the major change really to mention has been that the BMW 2002, we completed the work on that, and that has been handed over. But I'm going to just hand over to Nick, because he did a little test drive before that was handed back to the customer, and he captured that on video. So here's Nick.
just out in this customer's BMW 2002 E-Vocation, I'm going to call it, with Honda S2000 running gear that you'll have seen with Callum on the Uncut videos. Car came to us with quite a few little electrical faults, things like that. So we've been through it. We've done our first inspection, so had a look at the whole car, all the interior, what the paint and body's like, all mechanical. Overall, the car's put together really, really well. It's just the electricals. It was mostly the original electricals that sort of let it down a little bit. So we've worked through a lot of that. This thing drives really, really well. It's such a cool thing to drive. Now, it is November. The roads are in that kind of horrible, always slightly wet and greasy stage. So I'm not doing any Chris Harris heroics, because I'm not Chris Harris and I will crash. So I'm just taking it nice and easy. It's a final little road test just before the customer comes to collect the car. But wanted to share it with you because it's such a cool little thing. Yeah, the road's a little bit drier up here, so might be able to open it up a little bit and you can hear that VTEC, because it does sound absolutely awesome. I'm just going to try and do a little U-turn here. There we go. This has also got electric power steering actually from a Corsa, which works remarkably well actually. Right, we'll get out onto a little slightly bit of a straighter bit of road. It has got brand new Michelins on it, but it's still only 195s. Woo! 9,000 RPM and it absolutely sounds awesome. I love it. Yes, very, very pleased to have been able to have this car in the workshop and get it into a slightly better, more reliable condition for the customer. I know he's dead excited to be picking it up, and I hope it'll be back. I'm sure it'll be back for some more work. There's a few other things we'd like to address, a couple of things the customers raised, but what a thing, absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much, Nick. And finally, I'm going to hand over to Rich to show you what he's been doing in the upholstery lair. Here's Richard.
How's it, everybody? Good to be back. Nice to see you all again. Good news. The customer brought yesterday, actually, the customer brought the Ford Consul Capri doors in for me to do some work on the door cards. For those of you that can remember, I said there was a difference in the two cards that are copied with the clips. One was where the hole is dead center, lining with the hole in the actual card, and the other one I later realized was the offset ones. Anyways, he brought the cards. I can now make sure all these holes line up. He's also brought the little top strip that goes on top, so I can make sure that when this strip goes on top with the window scrapers there, my leather and foam that we put in there is not going to get in the way, and everything lines up, and so we're going to be able to fit them. So this is like a proper dry fit before we trim, and then I trim it and we can do another dry fit. So this will carry on. Again, then the customer decided he will bring, which is actually great because these are little filler jobs. He's brought me the sun visors, and he jokingly took this out of his car and he handed it to me and said, I brought these for you because I know you like them. So we had a bit of a chuckle. These are basically the cantrails. For those of you not familiar with the term cantrail, it's the strips that goes around the outer top of the car, so in between the windows and the roof lining. So those will go up there, or maybe that way around, I'm not sure. Then you've got your B-pillars. You've got B-pillars, uprights. We've got some C-pillar trims. They'll go there. You can see the little window over there, and then that will follow through I can show you if I'm correct. It's going to be something like that, and there you can see the windows start forming. So what we'll do is, I'm quite excited about this because I didn't realize there's not a lot of pictures on the internet available. When you drop these off, I was like, oh, no way, that's cool. It's like this weird crocodile lizard skin print. Jamie must try and get some close-ups of this. But the client found exactly the same vinyl. So we're going to keep that original. It's going to be all nice and white and bright, but with this cool sort of lizard embossed print on it, which is really cool. So it's going to be fun, because fun and challenging, but it's fun challenging because it will have a direction on it. So I'll just got to make sure. So what happens usually in this case is your yield of your fabric, if I can point to this. So the general rule is always cut into the roll, and then you just got to bear in mind your orientation. For instance, I can't cut. If those two match up like that, I can't cut this one like that way and that one that way. Otherwise, those lines won't line up. So when I cut these, I'll try and place them like this, so the continuity of this pattern carries on. And stripy ones can be difficult. The only thing that happens is you use a little bit more material, a little bit more off-cut. But for an end result that looks great, so worth it. So yeah, we'll show you guys. In the meantime, I'm going to strip these down. These will get Mark and Gaz and Steve will take these for me. They'll prep them. They'll put that nice black direct paint on there, because then panel is protected, and my glue then adheres to that very well. We've got one little repair job. This looks, I think it's the front cantrell. Looks like it. There's a bit of rust that came in there, but no problem. We'll, I think Cal said we'll probably just end up remaking the whole panel, but I'll leave that to the fabrication boys with their skills there, because if I attempt this, it will probably not come out as nice. So yeah, great to be having everything in-house. We'll work as a team, and then it comes out the door. So that's this project. There's not much going to happen on this, so just a little bit of cleaning here and there, and then I'm going to finalize that so that we can get the doors back to the client, because obviously they need to go and finish the metal work on the car. So we'll pick this up properly beginning of 2025. If you follow me now, I'll show you some W124 action, which now Jamie's got some shots. So what I did was I did the door cards and the dashboard first, because I knew that was going to be challenging getting those strips out the dashboard. But after a whole lot of YouTube videos, and I finally found the right one, the complete dash didn't have to come out, because usually you want to try and avoid that, because the dashboard can be tricky, getting it back in, and then you're sitting with a handful of spares. We want to avoid that, but managed to just strip the strips off. They're back in the car, they look great. The door cards are back in the car, apart from the back doors, and because the customer had an unfortunate event of a delivery vehicle rolling into his car. So we'll keep these off, because we don't want to be putting them on and off unnecessarily, so which is fine. So they'll just go into the nice rack. But Jamie's got some shots of that, so that looks really cool. What else have I done? I'll bring this over to you, Jamie. We've done small little touches. So we are de-veneering this car. Veneer is old school, and we don't want it in the car. So the client, we were worried about how we're going to get this. I can't trim that, and we're also painting. It's a bit iffy because of all this movement. So it's basically like a little roller shutter. I think it just curls up halfway inside there. Turns out there's black ones. That's a vinyl, nearly exact match. Customer got that off eBay, I think. He brought it, and I just fitted that. So that's going to look great. I also managed to, with a magic sponge, you guys need to remember this, with a magic sponge, there was some nasty glue marks. I think they had maybe a charger stuck to there or whatever sometime in life. The magic sponge really softly, just with a bit of lukewarm water, got all of that off. Now that looks great. So that's going to be black. We are also, the complete center console is going to be changed. So I don't know if I've mentioned this. Let me grab that as well, Jamie. I don't know if so we stripped all of this out the car. and these are the switches are still in the car now, but the customer requested that we trim this, but it's not that easy because this is a veneer and these switches were just flush fit. They didn't have little bezels on them. You can't simply just take a relatively thick material and then try and fold over. One, you'll see the little cuts in the corners. Two, the switch won't fit in. And to manually try and make that bigger to allow for the switch, it's just never going to work. Nobody's that good. So two options we had really: completely remake this to allow for material, or simply just go for a nice painted surface. And then this is where it started, and we decided a painted surface is probably going to be one of the better options because this is a high traffic area. If you look at this, that veneer does not look great at all, or should I say the lacquer on top. Why? Because it's keys, it's change, it's all sorts of stuff that goes on there. So we're just going to paint it and give it a bit more hard wearing. If you want to wipe it down, you will be able to, and you won't have a material that's going to be difficult to clean, and you don't really want to be scrubbing there with a lot of water and soap close to those switches. So that's how we got to that. So it's going to be a nice textured black, matte black, all the way through the center, which then is going to just take away all this veneer, the brown, so which is going to look really cool. Mark and the boys will do that for us. Those two pieces. Luke has designed a really cool aluminium billet gear surround, so we're upgrading that because it was a little bit of a veneer bit and then a bezel, and then with the numbers coming through also in wood. So we're taking all that away and doing it a cool billet bit. Later on, I think the customers requested for the gear stick to be extended a bit and just a different handle. So we'll get there later on because that's just a screw in. So we're leaving that for last. So what else did Luke do? Oh yes, Jamie's got some shots of me. I don't think he got me out with a electric file sander. I hacked away the old ashtray because nobody wants an ashtray in their car anymore because the customer fitted an airlift. So Carl came up with the idea that we put the airlift controller inside the ashtray. Then that's really cool because it's got this soft open and close sort of resistance gear in it. So you touch it and it opens, and all of a sudden you've got your controller. And then I think it was Luke, I might be unclear, I'm pretty sure it was Luke, designed this nice little bezel with a nice little emblem on it. Jamie will get some shots of. I think it looks absolutely brilliant. So yeah, can't wait for all of that to go back together because it's going to be cool. Because you would have had to just stick it with one of those nasty air vent sort of holders just on the dashboard in your face. Now it's nicely hidden, discreet, and quite cool when you press it and it opens up and you can lift your car up and down. Other than that, over here you can see some seat covers forming. So I've been cutting and laminating. So I cut the leather. This was a scratch trim for those of you that can remember back. I'm not making a lot of patterns. The only patterns that I'm making is I'm making these center sections. Why? Because of this fabric and all the lines, it needs to be in shape. So the parts that I've stripped from the old covers, they are a little bit deformed. So I didn't want to take chances. So I'm just going to make a pattern and just to make sure those lines, because then I can square it off and make sure those lines are exactly, and then we'll know when it pulls in, you won't have these lines running across the seat like that. So that's the reasoning for that. The rest are all just scratch trim because there's no need. We don't know if we're going to do another car, so we're not going to waste time making patterns that may or may not be used. And these are pretty good. So, but they are coming out really nicely. So probably next week I'll start fitting some of these. So next week we'll show you some upgrade. One thing I can show you guys is the front seat. So it's all been stripped down. We're leaving the one seat because we want to do a bit of a before and after. The customer, as with these things, this is a sprung seat. Now, although this is way more comfortable and more intact, because this is it's a 90s car. I think there's a date stamp on one of the headrests. I think Jamie took some videos, 1995. Most of these foam pads and components were made. So, but the springs are worn out a little bit. So I did a bit of a Google search and I saw you can actually buy a kit specifically for these cars to tighten up the springs. And all it is they sell you these sort of foam cut in cores. I'll pull one out. I just made my own because I'm not too sure about the density. That's all it is. I might add another piece, cut that on the bandsaw. It doesn't have to look pretty. That gets jammed in. It's just a little bit better than a tennis ball. And then that gets sort of just screwed in there on these sides because it's got 4 coil springs going down on the bolsters, and then it's got this sort of spring wire frame within that cross springs. So all I'm going to do is, if I show you here, if I leaving that in, I could push that down really easy. So to try and demonstrate, and simply all I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a little bit of time and we're going to sculpt some a little medium density foam, I'd say, and just get that. You can see that I've just made a little sample, stick that in there, something like that, and all of a sudden I can't squeeze that down anymore. So if you imagine I do that all the way there, all the way around there, and then a flat piece in there, because this is a really good base to work from. I think we're going to hit the mark, because these rubberized coconut hairs that Mercedes has been using since the 80s, they just last forever because it can't rot. Probably really bad for the environment if it goes in a landfill. So we're going to reuse this. Stick that on there. Fresh new foam. What they did was they did this for us. So springs, then this nice base pad, and then this is nearly 30 millimeters of open cell foam that got laminated. So we'll stick that on top there, and then on the cover, I don't have a front seat yet. On the cover, I put fresh foam on the leather, and with all of that, we back up to the original level with a little bit extra, and then with these padded pieces in here. Boom, nice firm seat. I'm pretty sure the customer's going to really enjoy that. I had a quick sit on it, and it is chalk and cheese, just with a bit of off-cut foam in there. So once I've sculpted everything nicely, I'm very confident it's going to work. The back seat on this is all just foam pads. Mercedes in the 90s did make really quality stuff. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So just a bit of new foam here and there, the top layers, and we're good to go. What else is there? What am I missing? Let me just have a look here around. It was a center console. You've got all the door cards and a dashboard. That's all good. Seats is work in progress. I think that is it. I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you very much, Richard. And I suddenly have a presenting role of handing over to other people. Last thing I'm just going to mention is merch. There's still time to get merch in time for Christmas, so go onto the shop. There's a link in the description. It's retropower.co.uk/shop. Hoodies, t-shirts, beanies, mugs, tons of stuff, key rings, really nice key rings. So get on there and get that in time for Christmas, and we will see you again next week.